Well, welcome back to Dozers to Drywall. This is our second video podcast that we've put together. As I said in the first video podcast, we're probably going to be talking to different people here at the Illinois Institute of Technology. In our first several podcasts, I'm your host. I'm Ray Lemming, the Director of Construction Programs here in the Department of Civil Engineering. It's a program we've been running for over 40 years now, and so we're here for our second program. And for today's program, I've actually got my associate professor that teaches one of my courses with me. We've been together for about 15 years. I've taught that course about 38, I think, or 35, something like that. But it's Professor Larry Dorn, and Larry has a very interesting history. He's works or has been working in the outside world almost his whole life in architecture. He is an architect. He's also has his degree in construction management. So he's worked in both of those. And before that, he was a certified Caterpillar bulldozer mechanic. Larry, say hi to the folks and tell them why you didn't wear your cat hat today.
Well, hello, everybody. I really should have, in the cat shirt, too, with the newest logo on it. But anyway, I do have a varied background. And everybody asked me, how did you plan this out? Well, I really didn't plan it out. Most of what happened was encouragement from one professor to the next, to actually you, 10, 15 years ago, I think, and then continued on from there. It was mostly encouragement. And so I did take people up on that, and it did take to the next step or so. And then, of course, you always meet other people that are influential in your life as you're going along. And you go to work for some companies that are great companies, and then you go to work for other companies that are not so great, but there's still things learned from that, and you continue to move on.
That's probably a key point right there. In our industry, it would be very rare to find anybody who was in the same company for their entire career. Construction jobs get finished, design jobs get finished, and the market itself oftentimes dries up. I think we talked a little bit last time with Bob Ryan how most companies spend roughly a third of their time trying to find more work. And so, and when that work runs out, we tend to move on. So it's not unusual in this business to look at a resume and see somebody who's worked for 3 or 4 or even 5 companies. And actually, that's kind of happened to you most recently. The company you're with, they kind of dried up their work. Am I right?
Well, yeah, that's true. And, we even teach that in class, prepare 10 estimates and send them out. And if you get one response, you're doing pretty good. And you have to keep up with that because just because you do one doesn't mean you're going to win the bid, so to speak. So, but no, that does happen. The economy is turning down slightly. I don't know how bad that's going to get, but that's another story. You do run into these things, and the bad part about architecture, the AEC industry in general, is it's feast or famine. There really is no middle ground with it. So you've got to be prepared for these things when they come to make adjustments and move on.
Well, even in my career, I don't think I've ever been unemployed. I mean, in the worst of times, there's still things out there people want you to do and still been able to put bread on the table. And I think that's your experience too.
Yeah, that's what it's been. I've noticed that, a lot of times you get started in one direction and you think it's going to be the be all end all. And you shouldn't think I'm going to work for XYZ Corporation for 50 years, get the gold watch, retire, and live happily ever after. I think those days are long gone. Maybe for our parents' generation that worked out, but not for us anymore. I remember being, when I was real young, and I was in a grocery store, and I was telling this woman, the woman at the checkout lane, about I was making a career change at the time, and she said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I learned in school that you're going to make 5 different career changes over your lifetime." And this is going back quite a long time ago, maybe into the 70s. So you can kind of see that that's true. Some of my friends that I did graduated from school with, some of them are already on their 4th and 5th company now that they're working for from after graduation. So that's pretty true.
Yeah. And your last job, you did a lot of work for the Veterans Administration. That architectural and engineering firm was doing estimates and design work to rehabilitate veterans hospitals in that. And I was thinking maybe you could talk a little bit what it's like working for the government, because the government is the largest procurer of construction and construction services in the United States, maybe in the world. And people that are coming into this profession or thinking of coming here to school and that may find that interesting.
Yeah, Ray, it is. The VA, the Veteran Administration, is just one of several within the federal government of outlets of work. We also try to secure GSA business, and that's a whole separate area all in itself, because I was told that the GSA is the world's largest landlord, based on all the locations that they own and different types. It could be anything from nuclear power to subsidized housing, whatever. It all follows underneath the GSA. But anyway, no, going back to what you originally asked me, VA, Veterans Administration, of course, there is the federal government location in Washington, D.C., which kind of is the overseer of all the rest of it. Every state here in the continental United States has at least a minimum of one facility. And then there's other locations like in Hawaii and on the island of Guam, and I believe the Virgin Islands as well, that are also VA centers. So where we're located here in the Chicago area, I believe there's 5 separate locations just here in the Chicago area itself that are major medical centers. The medical centers, if I remember correctly, what somebody told me was that started actually after the Civil War, was to build the VA and to make it, those were benefits for anyone who served in whatever branch of the U.S. military. And that's pretty much the truth. A lot of these, I originally thought they were hospitals, but they're not just hospitals. They're entire campuses of a medical center, and really that's what they call themselves, is VAMC, Veteran Administration Medical Centers. And some of the campuses are so elaborate, they actually have their own police department, their own fire department. One of them that I worked on up in Buffalo, New York, had its own beautiful 18-hole golf course right behind the facility. So
For rehabilitation purposes
yeah,
only.
exactly. Yeah. And then of course there's the really awesome one down in Augusta, Georgia, where of course, you know, when it's golf season, that's a big deal there. But no, anyway, they are complete centers, and it does offer all the various different benefits. Most of them are older buildings, and so there's a lot of rehabilitation. There's a lot of bringing things up to current code. I worked on several that were, the VA has specific terminology, and so the one that I worked on was correction of deficiencies. And what that meant was that particular building was a CLC, Community Living Center. It's like a nursing home, but it's really not a nursing home. And there were things that needed to be updated and upgraded. like 2 of the security door sets, and some of the electrical, and of course, fire protection is always important. There were areas that were not fire sprinklered on the outside entrance, so that had to be looked at separately.
So, so your company would do the design work, and as an architect, you're always worried about the code. As an engineer, to be blunt, I've never worried too much about codes. I figure whatever you give me to build must be okay. But that's my view of the world, and if it
Well,
isn't,
you bring up a very valid point, because we had within the office, there were what the owner liked to call is collaboration areas, a table like you and I are sitting at now, and a handful of chairs. And there would be an architect, there would be the HVAC engineers, and then there would be the electrical engineers, and plumbing engineer would be there, and everybody would be hashing this out. It was very interesting, because sometimes things, they didn't get it into an argument, but they did get into a little bit of a heated discussion where, wait a minute, you're taking up the room I need. So all of this had to be worked out, which is what happens on most sites. It has to be worked out. We teach this in class. Order of trades. The HVAC people have to go first, because their materials and equipment is bigger than anybody else's, and so they're given preference. And the electricians, of course, are pretty much working with 3/4 of an inch pipe to maybe a 2-inch diameter pipe. We can kind of fit that wherever it needs to go. So yeah, you get a group of people together, you hash it out, and it takes a while. It's really not so simple as you might think.
and do you find that frustrating, or
No, not really. I find it normal, because this is stuff that some of the stuff that I did find frustrating was when I did a lot of CPS, construction period services, and answering RFIs. And RFIs are requests for information, and they are usually sent by the contractor. And I'm a firm believer in making sure that all of this stuff is hashed out in the drawings, and that the drawings are properly keynoted and referenced, and dimensions. All of the necessary information should be on that drawing, and if not, referred to the specifications. So anyway, a lot of times my frustration was only with the lack of information not on the drawings, and that causes problems in the future.
well, and I can understand that, because one of your really big expertises that you have is you're really, in addition to many other things, you're a Revit expert. You can probably take any type of drawing program there is and create the final drawings that are used throughout the industry. You've even taught that here at school at times for us. So I can understand that.
Revit's an interesting tool. When properly set up from the very beginning, it's great. It's fantastic. It does a lot. Revit, it's a lot different than AutoCAD, because in AutoCAD we take a line and we manipulate it into objects. Whereas in Revit, you're installing a component. You say to me, I've got an air handling unit that needs to be on the roof, and of course it has to be placed in a certain spot on the roof. Well, we can do that in Revit. We can take out the whole air handling unit, or we can design one the size of what really needs to be up there, which those are replaceable items. A lot of times the old one that came off the roof is not big enough anymore for the application, the load that it's under. Revit is excellent for doing that. Revit also does lend itself slightly to estimating, but the key with estimating is you have to have the price. We have to come up with the price off a database or a phone call to a manufacturer. That was interesting. The other night was one of my tutoring sessions, the final for this semester, and at the very, very end, before we were all closing, a student said, "Oh, I've got something I want to share with everybody." I talked to the manufacturer for the elevator, and that manufacturer gave me I asked exactly how you told me to ask for a budget number, and he gave me a price of $125,000. I said, "That's about right," because I priced them out individually, and generally that comes 3,000-pound capacity, single car, non-freight. That's about right. It's $125,000. So that's what he came up with. And I said, "Thank you for sharing that with the class." Because elevators are really one of the easiest, Division 14, easiest things to estimate. You go into RS means, and then everything is in order the way the specs are written. How many feet per second, how many floors, hydraulic versus electric. So it was pretty good. I was surprised he went through that trouble, but that's the type of work he does. He's not missing anything. He even asked about contingencies in an email today, and how come there was no percentage listed for the subcontractor in that. So a short explanation.
Just for the folks at home, Professor Dorn mentioned CSI Division 14 just then, and many of you already know what that is, but for some of you who don't, there's a system of labeling everything on a construction project. It's called the Construction Specification Institute, CSI, and it's got 50 divisions. Interestingly enough, they're numbered 0 through 49, and some of them are actually empty to be filled in some other day when the next great thing's invented. But it's a system we use, and if you're especially if you're an estimator, both of us have been. Somebody says Division 7 or Division 14, we all know what we're talking about. It's one of the things we happen to teach here at IIT, and as I've told you before, one of the purposes in us doing these videos, at least as we get started, is to invite you to apply if you're interested in our academic programs. And at this point, I'm going to have my technician during the video go ahead and put up the scan items that you can go to our registration site. And I'm sure we'll come back to that at the end again. So back to where we're at, what are some of the things that you see coming on the horizon here that you're starting to see appear? A lot of people are talking about AI. I personally am not seeing it yet. I mean, other than ChatGPT or something, but I'm not quite seeing it in the construction field. I did see where one of the big companies that does document management claims they now have a program that will create the submittal log out of a set of specs, but I haven't seen that done yet. What do you see in as cutting edge?
I have to agree with you on AI. I think it's a little overhyped right now, and that's normal. Anything that's new that comes to the marketplace, it takes a little time to sort it all out, just like electric vehicles and all of that. Yeah, there's going to be one or two outstanding items more than something else, but I think it's a little early on for AI. What I like seeing is more of what I call the tools. Of course, Bluebeam is fantastic. Bluebeam is a huge help. And to any students that are in the middle of their degree here, definitely get that skills down, get the skills down for Revit. And of course, don't forget AutoCAD. It's not going to go away. And if you have a chance, spend some time with SketchUp. SketchUp was invented here in Chicago, and it was a tool that was used basically to throw something together 3D right away to go out and talk to a client. And I still feel the same way. It's very, very good to know. One of the things I like is Procore. I think Procore is an excellent company. When you're dealing with a project, and a project isn't just a building, like how we teach in estimating, it's the building, it's the parking lot, it's the site work, it's everything. There's going to be RFIs. There's just no way around it. And for management of that, I'm a firm believer in Procore and the other related softwares to it. I don't know that there's one better than the other, but I have had quite a bit of experience with Procore. We've used that a lot on VA hospital projects. I have mixed feelings about some people using Google as strictly a search tool. Yeah, there's a lot of things in there, but there's a lot of stuff mixed up with it. RS Means, I think, has been one of our best databases to use. I know that the government has its own system, and at one point you and I almost had to go to that if it wasn't for nicely twisting a few arms to get what we wanted. But no, we're where we need to be today. And I think Means has done an excellent job with that, especially with us. So between the combination, and there's still a lot of people out there using on-screen takeoff. I've run across people like that. And of course, we used that a long time ago. I like using both Adobe Acrobat for reading PDFs and Bluebeam at the same time for the drawings. So I put the specs in Acrobat and I put the drawings in Bluebeam. PDF is a good way to go because we can take stuff real quick, convert it to a PDF, and then send it out to somebody in California or wherever, and they're looking at it at the same time we are.
Yeah, it's somewhat interesting in that one of the big things you've taught in my course is the building control or the computer automation for security and life safety and all of that. And that seemed to be an exploding field for a while and then kind of matured a little bit. And at least from my perspective, it seems to be exploding again. And even in private homes now, you can get your breakers in the breaker panel put in with a smart breaker that you can control from your cell phone while you're down in Miami, Florida. So,
well, that's an interesting area you bring up. Division 25 has a little bit of support in it in CSI. I think it'll grow. I keep revising those slides all the time when we talk about the BCS because we used to specialize in that, but we're still presenting it. And one of the things I noticed is just the evolution from wired to wireless connections. And BCS, yeah, little by little, it's working its way into residential applications because the big thing is always about energy consumption. If we can control the amount of energy we're using, well, just for a little information, when Commonwealth Edison replaced the meter on the side of my house with a smart meter, as they're called, once a week I get, oh, you've used more energy than your neighbors, or you're using less than your neighbors, email type of thing. And that's fine. No, in the critical months, that's important to know. You can control your thermostat a little bit better. I grew up very similar to how you did. When you were in the house and you were complaining to your parents it's cold, and the first thing you heard was, put on a sweater. So, that's what you can do, put on a sweater. And not just for that reason, but we do need to control consumption, the water consumption as well. And so Division 25, I think, is important. I think it's maturing. The biggest thing is I'd like to learn a lot more about BACnet and how to control that. I did some work. The company, when I was at Bancroft, every summer did some philanthropic work. We invited a bunch of high school students in a couple of times from a disadvantaged area of the city, and nobody wanted to work with them. And so I said, all right, I will, and shared a little bit about what we do down here at IIT. And then at the same time, one of the students was a computer major, and he liked what I talked about when it came to building control, and he was very interested in BACnet, learning how to program it. And of course, they always ask, how much money will I make? Well, that varies, but no, he had a genuine interest in it, and I thought that was pretty cool that he took the interest and wanted to learn more about it, wanted to know. I gave him my company email and said, stay in touch. We had them as seniors, so they were moving on to colleges. But I think overall, that's an area, I've seen photos of how they were doing the wiring and the connecting. At Little Company in Mary Hospital, they put 6 brand new air handling units up on the roof. And there were pictures of the interior I saw where one guy was sitting with a laptop and another guy had this like bundle of wires and he was taping them and labeling them with specific labels. And all of that had to be done one by one. So those are up and coming areas. And of course, that was nowhere near the commissioning that you and I talk about and the control and balancing of them. All of that stuff has to be tested. Nobody's spending millions of dollars to have it not work right. They want it to work right. So testing and balance and commissioning are vital to a system working correctly.
And I will point out that the architectural engineers in our department here are the people that learn how to do that. And BACnet, for those of you who don't know, is really a proprietary name by one of the HVAC companies for Linux. And Linux is an open software, an open computer language that almost all commercial equipment is written in, including everybody's car. Most people don't know that the navigation system inside their car is a Linux system, and that. But I will also add that when I get that notice from Commonwealth Edison that I'm using more power than my neighbor, I usually take an extension cord and run it over to their back patio and start using their power so that I don't get that notice.
Well, you're just trying to make it a level playing field.
That's right. It has nothing to do with stealing the neighbor's power. It has to do with making ComEd happy. So, that's how that goes.
Especially when they didn't invite you to the last backyard barbecue.
That's right. Yeah.
Come on, be nice.
So anyhow, that little bit of fun being had here. When we look at other things that we've done here, you also have worked in both our surveying course and our capstone course. The surveying course is fairly obvious to just about anybody what surveying is. It's what George Washington and Thomas Jefferson did, survey the land, and we still do today, and the Egyptians did find out where the Nile River is after the flood and whatever else we do. But in the capstone, it's a special course that's required in all engineering schools for the seniors to use all the skills that they had and simulate working in an engineering firm. So tell us a little bit about that type of work, doing work with capstone.
Well, little by little, it seems like it's coming down to we're just one of the remaining universities left that still teaches surveying. And that's kind of bad. That's kind of sad because of course, coming from the architectural side first before I ended up in civil engineering, I always thought that was an important course to learn because as an architect, you don't put the building wherever you feel like it. It has to go in a certain location for specific reasons, and not just code, but also you want to know the coordinates of where it's lining up so you can take the best advantage of sun exposures and control the wind exposures and all of that. But no, surveying I always thought was important. We do a great job with that here. Many different aspects of surveying is taught. I was involved in that for a couple of years. The capstone, I've always felt that was a good course because you're going to apply everything of the last 4 years into one semester. Everybody should know when you land a job, wherever it's going to be, somebody's going to tell you, okay, here's your computer, here's your desk, now we need you to get to work. And you need to be able to do what an employer is asking you to do. Several times, going back, you mentioned about set points. Somebody comes to work for you, and I need you to do the set points on these controllers. You need to be able to do what an employer is looking for. I think there's too much thinking in the wrong direction that just because you graduated, okay, here I am, give me a job. You have to be able to do what an employer is looking for. So you should have a multiple skill set and as marketable skills. I think it's important that you understand these have to be marketable skills and not just something that will get you in the door. Things are evolving, and things are evolving faster in construction and engineering and architecture than they are in any other fields right now.
So job preparation is important, but we still only give you enough of the basics. And when you get out there, it's the beginning of your learning. I remember one job I worked on, the superintendent said, you spent 4 years getting a degree, and now you're working for me, and you're going to spend 4 years getting an education.
No, that's very truthful.
And both of us have spent so much time on job sites, we can identify with that. But
well, each company, whoever it is that you go to work for in the AEC industry, does have its unique things about it based on the client, etc. But overall, you need a good skill set. You need to be able to do what they're looking for and be able to do what they can ask you to do. Every once in a while, I get an email from a student from not too long ago that graduated and went on. And I remember this one girl, she had made the comment, she said, yeah, I just had to email you both because one of the first things they asked me to do is if I knew how to calculate the height of the instrument. And I did. I showed them that. And they just liked that. And then they saw my booklet from the estimating class. And they said, oh, you worked in a group? Yeah, I worked in a group of 2 other people. And this involved this entire hospital project. And they went, oh, wow, that's fantastic. Because that's what you're going to do. Whoever you go to work for, it doesn't matter who it is, they will put you in a group with other people. And you need to get along and work with that group. Everything that gets done within the firm takes many people working on the same team that's led by a project manager. That's just how it goes. A complete set of construction documents, which means the full set of drawings, all the divisions, etc., and a set of specifications is done by a group of people. It's not done by one person.
if I remember that student correctly, they hired her and immediately sent her to Sweden for 3 years, didn't they?
That's another one. Yeah, no, that was a different one. The one that went to Sweden was somebody who I hadn't seen for a while, and I had contacted them. And so she said, yeah, you'll be proud to hear that I'm working for Walsh Construction on a project over in Norway, is what it was.
Norway.
Close enough. And so, and she said I was asked to do an estimate on a certain part of the project, so I was able to do that. And that was good to hear. It really was. From time to time, I do hear from different people, and they tell me where they're working, who they're working for, etc. And it's interesting on what they're doing. So I think we give a pretty good background here, and topping it off with the capstone, because the capstone is the final design project of your degree here, and that's split up into groups, and everybody is asked to take their part of the group and contribute to the final booklet, which it was kind of funny. Over the years, you had told me about how with estimating there's a final presentation, there's no final exam. We all get in the auditorium, we take this final exam, and that's it. No, estimating class requires a final presentation, which is professional quality booklet, professional quality PowerPoint, and each person gets their 15 minutes of fame to explain what they did and how they did it, And it's kind of similar, but not exactly. Okay? Very similar to a PhD defense, where you're presenting your facts and findings and you're proving how you got that.
But that's not unlike the real world. In the real world, you got clients, and you got to go talk to those clients.
Right.
And that's why we do that exam that way. And I know you've told me many times about different clients you work for, whether it was some type of a building you did on the west side of Chicago, and you had to go talk to the city of Chicago permit department,
Right.
or somebody else. You know, I think a lot of students tend to think because that they're taking a course that they just got to get the right answer, and when they get enough right answers, they get a grade and they can move on. And when they get out, nobody's going to sit them in a back room to get a lot of answers. And you deal with people, whether you deal with the group you were talking about at work, all the different types of engineers, or you deal with clients. You know.
Well, a good example of that is last year at this time, a group of us went to Hines, the VA hospital out here in Maywood, and they were doing a remodel of the CLC center there. And so that required us to visit with them. And we did. There was actually a group of 5 of us. I was one of the architects, and then everybody else was pretty much an engineer. And we went into each room that they wanted to do a remodel on, and we had to take notes and take photos. Speaking of technology, we used, the first time I saw it was a 3D camera. I wasn't aware of that. And it takes kind of in a 360-degree view of the room where you're standing. So certain things they wanted to remove from the room, and then of course that involves painting and patching the walls, and certain they wanted the covers over the fin tube radiators to be sandblasted and repainted. They wanted the ceramic tile in the washroom, and then there was a separate sink that was outside the washroom. And all of that, those things had to come off, and all the tile had to be removed. They were upgrading the tile. And as a matter of fact, I think we were doing solid surface material. And solid surface material has a better application for bacteria and germ control than tile does, because you get the grouting and the pores. But no, that was working with a group there. There were certain people that were doing certain things, and then I was taking the notes on what everybody was doing because I had to work up the estimates for that. It was a very interesting project because some of the money was being donated. And what the VA wanted to do was 2 rooms at a time. They had figured out where they wanted to know what the cost was to do each room individually and then do 2 at a time, because they couldn't shut the whole area down. Because when you get into this now, you have to control dust, you have to control, and some of the things were asbestos related. So those tiles, that area had to be sealed off, and you couldn't just stop the function of that room, that building, because you were doing 2 at a time. So we had to work with them on that, and that adds to the cost as well. All of these things that are part of it have a cost to them, and you have to catch that. And they want it to be accurate, and unfortunately they felt there was more money than it should be. But and this was just like last year, so the effects of the current inflation were starting to show.
So it's a people business.
It is. It is. Yeah, you need interpersonal skills. You really do to be able to do well, and you're going to be working with many different people that are full-time employees, and then of course you work with the COR, you work with the other management level people who have to answer for all of this, who have to go to Washington. We need so many million to do this project and that. So it's an interesting group.
So what about private projects you've worked on? How did that differ than these?
Private projects are way different. Private projects are based mostly on time. And what happens is, this is where scheduling comes into play, and where scheduling is so important. Most of the time, developers, owners, investors, they want to know how long this is going to take. And they want to know how you're going to meet the milestones along the way. When I was involved in the row houses of Montclair Station, that was 4 buildings of 5 units in each building. They were the old-fashioned row house look, but designed in a more modern way. And they were kind of tight. They were about 18 foot wide by 35, 36 feet deep, which included a 2-car garage on the first floor, modern bathroom on every floor. That seems like what everybody wants in America is, I want a bathroom within 10 feet of the big screen TV so I don't miss anything during the Super Bowl. So that's very common. So those buildings were, and then they were very nice to work on, but that was all time sensitive. You had to be, at the same time, you had the foundation guys working, you had to get ready for the next crew that came in. And it was a constant flow. One time, all of the staircases, the custom-built staircases showed up, and the delivery person left them all out in the open. And I said, wait a minute, we got to move this in. This has got to get under roof here. We can't leave this out. And of course, the carpenter, he didn't want to do it. And I said, well, you don't want to move them. I'll get my guys to move them, and I'll back charge you. I said, that's all there was to it. So he didn't like that, but he did move them. You have to be responsible for materials on site. A lot of stuff comes, and you just can't leave it out in the open. And of course, there's always theft. Every once in a while, we'd run into a problem with somebody trying to steal copper off the site from the plumbing or the connection from the utility company, that sort of thing. But no, private investment is completely different. It's all profit run. It's profit motivated, and it's time sensitive. So that's a little bit different from the government, where the government is more concerned about specifications and about delivering the project exactly the way they want it.
Okay. And how do you think, do you think we get both those aspects through to our students as we teach things like the estimating and that?
Well, the estimating course to me has always been not just estimating. It's I like to call it a 2 separate subject rolled into 1 semester. Construction, means and methods, how to deliver the project, and then estimating the project. You can't estimate something unless you know how it goes together. I mean, there's just no way. It's not possible. You have to know the timetable in your head. Everybody knows you can't put a roof on a building without the walls, but at the same time, it's more than just that. And we teach that. We talk about that. And we talk about it a lot through personal experiences. You've done a lot internationally, and I've done a lot locally. So I think we cover the gamut. I think this is important on how we establish the building blocks with students so that they understand how this whole thing works. And everything you learn in this class will be applied in all the remaining classes of the construction engineering and construction management degrees. It's not something you use just one time. When that student earlier today emailed me about the percentages, and I said, well, if you remember question number 3 from the midterm test, the relationship, because he was asking me, he says, well, don't we have to put money in the project for the GC? And I said, no. Don't you remember how the GC has a contract with the owner-developer group? And the same thing with the architect. They have a contract with the owner-developer group. And I said, you don't put that in the estimate. I said, that's adding money where it's not needed. And I said, don't forget, now contingency goes back to question number 2, is as we have more information, during the design process, contingency becomes smaller and smaller. So those are things that you will use over and over again throughout the entire your career, whether you're working in the office as an architect or an engineer, or whether you're in a job site trailer, you're the project manager. Project managers have to know all of that.
Well, one of the things you do much better than I do is you keep track of students out there in different companies and that. I have to say I'm not nearly as good at doing that.
Well, you've had your moments of bumping into somebody that you taught 30 years ago, but
I did just this afternoon.
yeah, see?
There was a guy out here in our concrete lab that I taught him in 2006, he said. Oh, wow, okay. Larry's referring to an event that happened downtown once, and I walked 4 blocks along Michigan Avenue and ran into 4 different people carrying hard hats that were working on high rises in the area, and all of them were students of ours, and that. But part of what you've done, and I really appreciate it, is you've brought many of those students back into our lectures for the specialties they do. Whether it's one of our students that's now an electrical estimator or a
Specialist on low voltage.
Yeah. And so that's kind of helpful when we can bring these people back. And also, one of the things I think we've always done is we have used that information to keep our courses current and update things. When we started estimating, we had paper documents and Dodge reports and
CD discs.
Oh, we didn't even have the CD disc yet.
Yeah,
that's when you became a student. We had the CD disc. And today we got the cloud and all that. So Bluebeam was a good one that students first brought me, and then Bluebeam wouldn't give it to us. So we used, what was the other one?
On-site.
On-site. And then Bluebeam finally opened up and started giving students.
Well, a lot of that stuff, especially the Bluebeam story, actually started when I was helping Arjun Pandey, who was one of our PhDs at the time, and he was assigned to me for me to help him with his research. Well, we were up at a hospital all the way up in Barrington, and we ran out of materials, printed materials to collect data on. And the electrical foreman that we were talking to at the time, he says, I have Bluebeam. I had never heard of it before. He says, do you have these documents on a thumb drive? Yeah, we do. Gave him a thumb drive and he plugged it in, and I'm looking over his shoulder while he's printing these out. And I said, this is an awesome tool. I was really excited about it. I remember coming back and telling you about it, and you said, okay, yeah, we should look into it. And it took a little while. I think it was 2 years later. And the Bluebeam company, as I think a lot more people in the software industry are figuring out that, you got to get the kids while they're in school and they know what this is, so that when they graduate and go to work for XYZ Construction or whoever, they'll say, hey, boss, we had this in school and it was really good. Can we get it here? And that has happened, and even RS Means has followed that, and to a certain extent, Autodesk has followed that with student access to Revit and AutoCAD while they're in school, and also for us instructors as well. That has been a big help. I used it during when I was introducing Revit to people here a few years back. But no, I thought that was important. I feel that bringing people in that graduated from here and are working in the industry is proof to show to the current group of students that this is not something where every once in a while I get accused of blowing smoke, but that's all right. I've gotten used to it. It is a viable industry, and you develop a good set of marketable skills, and you will get somewhere. You really will. These people are experts in their field, as we know, with Hannah and with Brent. Unfortunately, John couldn't make it this semester with fire suppression for us only because his workload is enormous at work. So he really wanted to come. But we'll get him next semester. And I want to expand in other areas that I know that people are experts in. I think it's important. You know, we're hearing a lot now about there's a shortage of skilled tradespeople. And that's kind of sad. I was listening to an interview with Jim Farley, who's the current CEO of Ford Motor. And he's claiming that he has over 5,000 openings for mechanics, electricians, plumbers, etc., and starting salaries at about 120,000. And I say to myself, gee, if I were young, I wouldn't mind doing that again. But anyway, no, all kidding aside, they were saying that we needed to develop the trade schools, which, you know, aren't around like they used to be. And it's kind of a shame. And I think we're filling part of that here at Illinois Tech with project management. I know when I was working at another location, one of the guys, he was the PM for the little company in Mary, and he said, Larry, you go to these sites, and Paolo was the general on that one. He said, everybody's running around with an iPad nowadays, and everybody's plugged in real time, and when I point out that somebody missed something here or the wall is in the wrong position, they're marking it up and getting ready to correct it almost instantly. I said, yeah, no, that's where things are evolving.
Well, I think the point in what all you just said is that what we teach, there's jobs out there.
Right.
You can go on the internet and go to YouTube and look at the 10 most worthless degrees that you could possibly get. Some of them are absolutely funny. My wife calls those basket weaving degrees, but our people work, and we've worked, and I think that's what we want to say. And again, as we finish up here, because we do have to teach class tonight, which means we do got to get out of here and go get some dinner before we get to class.
Pedro Hill remind us.
And so, again, we want to put on the screen there the scan screened the URL to come if you're interested in any of our courses to look what we have. We have asked for our own email for the video. I haven't gotten it back from our IT people yet, but we will get to that. And I do appreciate you coming, Larry. And
you're welcome. My pleasure.
Even though we have to teach tonight, you had to come anyhow. And we'll have another one next week when we get to it. I'm hoping to have Dr. Stephen Kleps, and I'm not going to give everything away, but Stephen Kleps took classes at Second City Comedy, and he did so well that all his classmates went on to Saturday Night Live, and they sent him here to get his PhD in civil engineering, figuring that's about as good as his sense of humor was. So we now have him, but that's what we'll look for. Thank you very much, people. Say goodbye, Larry.
Goodbye to all the folks at home and wherever else you are.